Hi everybody. I had some people contact me, not a lot, like 2 or 3 people. They wanted to know more about James Bagley, the priest that I talked about in the last video. So I do have a little bit of information on him. So I'll share it with you. James Bagley, he was made rector of Stockport by Robert Lee of Addington and Thomas Bagley of Stockport. And I believe it was 1370, and he was between, what my estimate is, he looks like he was between 13 and 16 years of age. This was later followed by Robert trading land. It was like an additional exchange of land for a night service to James Bagley, which James Bagley, and this is probably in 1400 or 1401, and James Bagley actually used the Bagley arms that you can still see on a seal on the original document of that transaction. And this was for land in Stockport that Robert Lee of Addington had, that he had gotten by marriage to Isabel Davenport, who was the daughter of John Davenport, but they were descendants of the De Eaton family of Warwickshire that actually was the barons of Stockport. And so this land he acquired, but he was actually the fourth husband of Isabel Davenport. So this later brought out heirs from previous marriages that contested Robert and his holdings on that land that he traded, that James and Thomas Bagley Jr. got in exchange. And this later, which I'm not going to go into detail on this video, but I'll do it on another video, erupted into a feud that happened between Thomas Bagley and Lees of Bagley. So it was Thomas Bagley against the Lees of Bagley, and I think it erupted from this land exchange that went bad. And I think I do have some notes here, so let me check it out. I think that was from 1406, 1406 to 1435, that this feud erupted between Thomas Bagley and the Lee family of Bagley because of this land exchange. But anyways, back to James Bagley. So on January 17th of 1375, James Bagley of Robert Lee, they did a confirmation to John Catesby of the manor of Rotley, which the Bagleys seem off and on. William Bagley, who's a relative of James Bagley, actually held land there as well. So so they confirmed this to Robert Lichfield of Warwickshire, and believe it or not, there seems to be a lot of connection between these families in Cheshire with Warwickshire, and even some of the Bagleys seem to have property south too. So wasn't unusual at that time. A lot of times when families would get grants and stuff, they would sometimes space them out between counties so they didn't become too powerful in one county, so they couldn't really capitalize on massing a force against the king or other families or whatever. So it's like a counterbalance a lot of times. So anyways, so they granted this land, and that's with several seals. You'll see 2 Lee seals on that are original Robert Lees, and then of Addington, and then another Lee, I think of Lyme, so their seals are on there. Then you have James's, which at this time is using an ecclesiastic seal of a P for St. Peter, because he was working for the Catholic Church at this point. But like I said, later on he was using his own seal as well as the and he had the Bagley arms with a bend across it, best I remember, and it's like a little bar goes across between the 3 lozenges. So at that point, I think it mentions also in that deed how, I was trying to think for a second, how you put together medieval genealogies. It's very complex. You got to go by land grants, recognition rolls, and that's what I used when I put together and other things. There's other roles out there too that I put together, like this family's genealogy or an ancestor of mine. Like I said, now James's father was Thomas Sr., and Thomas Bagley Sr. Resided, and they seem to move all over the county, but he's recognized on there as being of Knutsford at the time. And Thomas Bagley was a veteran of the French wars. He fought at Calais. He was at the Siege of Calais, and then he fought at the Battle of Poitiers. And he was recognized on the recognition roll for getting a pension for his service, in the French wars. And Thomas was a descendant of Hugh Bagley, which was a cousin, or is a very close relative with the well-known Sir William Bagley. So Hugh Bagley, they're either brothers, first cousins, or it's an uncle and a nephew, because they are actually on deeds together and things of that nature. So that's who they descend from. But back again to James. So when this feud broke out in 1406, it seems like James left. He left the county, and he became rector of All Saints in Yorkshire, which is an amazing church. It's still there. You can go see it. And not only can you see it, you can see a stained glass image of James Bagley himself, and there's a shield, and probably an ecclesiastic shield that he was granted on top of the other one that has an R on it, probably for rector. That's just my guess. You know what I mean? I could be totally wrong on that. But not only that, there was also an additional Bagley arms that was mentioned in, if I can remember, it was a book in Yorkshire, and it's talking about the stained glass windows and and the things of the county. Can't think of it right now, but anyways, it mentions there was another stained glass that was attributed to James Bagley that had the Bagley coat of arms of the Cheshire family, a Bagley coat of arms of the three lozenges, but it was destroyed in 1656 or 1659, and so that's what happened to that stained glass. But the other one is still there. They date it between the 1420s, you know what I mean, and it's a picture of James Bagley with two other individuals, and I forget their name. And not only is it just the Bagley, you can still see a lot of other arms is up there, like the Alcock family, that's arms is in the church too, which is a Cheshire family too, that actually they must have intermingled a lot. I've had very distant matches with Alcocks, Booths, Savages, and Masseys, that which is amazing, because two of them, one of them knew that they were a descendant of Thomas Savage, Lord Rivers, and he was a descendant of the family of Lyme, the Lee family of Lyme. He married into that family through Thomas Dayners. His wife Isabella Bagley had a daughter, Margaret, and he was married to Margaret, one of her husbands. She was married a few times. She's actually married to John Bagley first, but a lot of people don't know that. But anyways, he went to York, and he became the rector there. And he seemed to do pretty well in Yorkshire, as the rector there. And like I said, he was the rector of York from 1413 to 1440. He had a son named Thomas, and he was a canon at St. Agatha's and was barred from office because he was the child of an unmarried parents, because it seems like James may have been in trouble because he was living, even though he's a priest, he was living with someone almost in a marriage type situation. Now his brother, who was a soldier, and mind you, this is not right after the Black Death, it devastated, England a lot. And he had a brother named Robert Bagley. And it appears he may have been married, and there's one document, you can see it, John Savage, a lot of prominent individuals are on this land grant in Walgate in Cheshire, and or Cheshire, and it mentions him being married, and he was a soldier, fought in the Irish War with Richard II, blah blah. But his wife was Isabel, and I believe she was probably Isabella Savage, and because John Savage is actually a witness to this charter, and it's early 1400s too, mind you, and so this he wound up himself taking on and becoming chaplain to the Booth family, a chapel master to the Booth family. So he stepped into almost a priestly role, even though he was married and he was a soldier, because so many priests had died at this time. They were just snagging individuals that could fill into the positions because there was no one to fill into these positions. So I think that's what was going on in the case of Robert. But there was a lady, Dorothy Bentley Smith, that actually translated that document of Robert Bagley that I got, and very interesting. And she has a book you need to check out, and it's called it's like the military history of Macclesfield. And look her up and look that book up. It's got a lot of good information in it. Anyways, so he gets in trouble. His son Thomas now is an interesting individual. I'll try to run him down. He appears to have a kid too. He wound up, this is my opinion, I believe he is the Thomas Bagley who was burned at the stake, and I think that was in 1431, and he went all the way down to Essex, I believe. Now I can't prove it's him, but I have a good idea. He fits in the time frame and everything, and he was burned at the stake for being a Lollard, which was kind of an early form of Protestantism. Being a Protestant, basically. But he was caught for saying something, about the communion, which was, if you can make a god out of bread, you have made a god that rats could eat. And that was what he was accused of in making that statement that he got kind of burned at the stake for. But he after that, in 1414 of June, James, he was held from promotion of other orders for 4 years. And then June 1426, he became rector of canon law and was getting 15 marks sterling for 2 years. In 1412 or 1420, he held an exchange for the rector of Kilham, Notts for the rector of Leeds. And that's kind of the last document. I did see a report on, and I have contacted the Yorkshire archives to see. I doubt if it's still in existence, but I read in an old book from the 1800s, they were talking about his will was still around, which would be interesting to see and get translated and stuff. So I'll see if that pops back up. But I think that's about all I got on James. Like I said, he was bearing the Bagley arms into the 1400s, which totally blows apart what the College of Arms says, that the Bagley family died between 1350 and 1370, because you have James Bagley bearing his arms in 1401. He has a brother, Thomas Jr., so he'd be an armorous-bearing individual himself, and they had a brother named Robert, who is down in the Walgate area. And through the recognition, just in the feud, there's a bit of a genealogy going, a little ways for Thomas Jr., who was in the feud with the Lisa Bagley. And like I said, when it comes to these genealogies, putting stuff together, no one can prove 100%, like, oh, I'm from this individual or that individual. That's why they go by a thing that's called the visitations. They went around the 1500s, but they're full and they're flawed. There's a lot of mistakes in them, but they did the best they could do for the time being, which they didn't really try to run down people that were heirs or distant relatives or anything like that. So they went right to the halls. And like I said, with Bagley Hall, it was split through several heirs. It was being used a lot as a dowry property. And it split early. And like I said, you can see earlier videos, there was two lines that came out from Peter Bagley of Bagley Hall. And there was two heirs, and they had two lines, and they were a very extensive family. There's no way from what I looked at, going through the genealogies, that they could have died out. But it's like I said, the property, Bagley Hall, was pretty much a dowry type property. Several heirs were in it. Robert, I think in 1422, traded his land, which was James's brother, for other land, and I think he had land there. It was called Haberley Hurst or something like that. And he traded his land there to, possibly they were cousins, I don't know, with the Lees of Addington. They seemed to be pretty close. So they were probably or the Lees of Bagley, they seemed to be pretty close, which is pretty much the Lees of Addington. So, like I said, the property was there. There was an exchange. There was an exchange, like I said, with James and Thomas, too, for land there, for the land in Stockport. And I think they lost most of that. Some of it passed down. It appears like John, in the 1500s, it was mentioned on Robert Chantrell's will, which is other relatives of ours, that he's mentioned still on that property of it being his own, which came from probably that old land grant. And Robert seems to be staying between Norbury, and he appears to have some of that property still in Stockport. And he was buried in Stockport, and that's Robert of Norbury, and that was in 1590 when he was buried. But like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video on James, and like I said, there was quite a bit of information, and it's like I said, none of these individuals that I talk about have been researched. I'm the only one researching it, and I'm putting together their histories to keep their names alive. And like I said, I do this all out of my own pocket. And I'll put a PayPal link if you want to help me, to get more documents. I got all kinds of documents that still need, translated and stuff. And I'm just trying to fill in that history for all of us Bagley descendants to know. So, and as I get it, I can share it to you like I just did about James Bagley. And like I said, if you go to All Saints in York, you can see the oldest image of a Bagley on that stained glass window, or Bagley, because I've seen it go back and forth, believe it or not, even though there's no link to them in Ireland. It's just back in when they wrote stuff, it just however it sounded to them. And it was going that same way here in America too. So, with even all the way up to the 1920s, I seen them misspelling my grandfather's name from Bagley to Bagley, And so I hope you enjoyed the video. Like I said, All Saints is still there in Yorkshire. I believe you can still see they got pictures of the stained glass window online, so you can get on there and see it yourself. And have a blessed day.